Multiclassing in Pathfinder 2e can be difficult to understand if you're coming from D&D 5e or any edition of D&D from the last 30 years. Multiclassing in those systems means taking a level in a different class other than your own. In Pathfinder 2e, you can't do that, but you can still multi-class. This is thanks to Pathfinder's archetype system, which I will not be going over in this video. If you want to know how archetypes work, click this video to watch it first and then come back to this one. Assuming you know the basics of archetypes, it's time to talk about multiclass archetypes. These are, by default, the simplest archetypes in that they don't give you any brand new abilities not available to any existing class, rather it lets you put some of another class into your own. But a lot of people are sleeping on multiclass archetypes, and there are some wild combinations you can do. So today I'd like to go over every single multiclass archetype in Player Core 1 and Player Core 2 in a tier list format, telling you which ones are the strongest and which ones are just not worth taking. Huge shout out to the members of the No Not Ones Patreon who help me keep making content. Thank you all for letting me do what I do. If you'd like to join them for $10 a month, there is a link in the description to the Patreon. Thank you all so much. So there are two main aspects that go into how I rank an individual multiclass archetype. The first is just overall power level. Typically, the more front-loaded a base class is, the better its archetype is going to be, because you can only access features from a class typically at twice the level the class would normally get them. So if a class has a really good 8th level feat, well, the archetype will only get that for you at level 16, so I have to keep that into account. They also get bonus points for how universally useful they are. You know, if an archetype is incredible, but only on rogues, that's not going to be an S tier archetype. But if an archetype is really good on every class in the game, it gets a lot of bonus points for that versatility. Those are the two main things we're looking at, so let's jump into it with Player Core 1's Bard. The Bard dedication right out the gate is fantastic. You're getting 2 castable cantrips which use Charisma as your casting modifier, which is already one of the best universal stats to use for casting, because Charisma is used for a lot more than just magic compared to Intelligence and Wisdom. They also give you 2 skill proficiencies. I'm not going to waste your time by going into the details of each skill proficiency, because 9 times out of 10 you might already be trained in that skill, in which case you can just get trained in any other skill of your choice. They've got some really low-level feats that you can combine with a lot of different classes for some fun combos. For example, Emotional Push on a rogue can just get you free sneak attacks, even if you're not flanking with somebody, and Versatile Performance is amazing on any character because it just makes performance stand for almost every single charisma-based skill. On top of that, you can snag Courageous Anthem at level 8. This is a really late time to get something like that, but it's hard to look down on +1 to attack and damage for the entire party, especially if you don't already have a Bard. Sneaking that onto a fighter or a wizard to buff everyone around them is just phenomenal. Bard archetype gets an easy A tier from me. I was thinking S tier, but they just don't have quite enough universal support and no single feature that just stands out amongst the crowd. I'm also not going to mention any of the basic expert and master spellcasting feats because they are implied. If the core class is a spellcaster, those feats exist and I am taking them into consideration. The cleric dedication gives just about as much as the bard in 2 castable cantrips that use wisdom instead of charisma, so it's a little bit less versatile, and it does give you 2 skill proficiencies. On top of that, however, it does come with your chosen deity's anathema that you will need to stand by. If you just pick up the cleric dedication for fun, but then pick a deity that doesn't coincide with your character's beliefs and you start breaking those anathema, rules as written, you will lose the powers from your entire cleric archetype. They've got some okay low-level feats, like you can get access to domain spells, which are really hit or miss, and you can get healing and harming hands, which will up your heal and harm spells to D10s instead of D8s. That's not terrible, but overall, there's just not that much to get excited about here. You don't get access to either of the cleric's doctrines, so you don't get the bonus from being a war priest or a cloistered cleric. Overall, you're just getting access to divine spells and some mediocre low-level feats. Unfortunately, I do have to give the cleric a C-tier ranking, as there's just not a lot of incentive for most classes to take it. The druid dedication is incredibly similar to cleric in that it gives you 2 cantrips, wisdom is the casting modifier, and 2 skill proficiencies along with an anathema based on your chosen order. However, as a slight bonus for taking the druid dedication, you do get to learn the Wild Song language. That is Pathfinder's version of Druidic, so you do basically get a whole bonus language just from taking the dedication. Now, druids are super front-loaded with some amazing feat choices, like animal companions. If you're a martial character, you can grab verdant weapon. As long as your weapon of choice doesn't use any metal, you can grow and shrink your own weapon into a little seed you keep on your person at all times. You can speak with animals with animal empathy, or just take poison resistance as a useful upgrade. Druids have a lot going on at low levels, and that's what you're looking for in a good archetype. Not great or mind-blowing by any means, trust me, we'll get to those, but Druid gets a solid B tier. The fighter dedication doesn't give nearly as much as the last few dedications. It gives 2 skill proficiencies and trained in martial weapons. If you are something like a wizard or a cloistered cleric that wants to use martial weapons, this is a way you can gain access to them. The fighter's resiliency feat for some bonus hit points isn't bad on a squishy character like a wizard, and gaining reactive strike at level 4 is pretty dang great. Even core class martials usually have to wait until level 6 to gain reactive strike. This does give you access to some low-level fighter feats like Vicious Swing and Sudden Charge, which are great, but overall this archetype just doesn't offer that much. Even its big level 12 feat, in my opinion, is one of the worst feats in the game. Diverse Weapon Expert increases all of your simple and martial weapons to Expert, and gives you advanced weapons at trained proficiency. Assuming you're a wizard or a class that is not trained in anything beyond simple, you are spending an entire character feat to catch your martial weapon proficiency up to your simple weapon proficiency, which you got at like level 11, I think? But unless you really need to be a wizard with an arbalest, chances are you don't need to waste a full character feat on this. It is hard to recommend the fighter archetype on any character aside from someone who wants to just cheat out those low-level feats like getting Vicious Swing on your Barbarian. Overall, I give the fighter archetype a D tier just because it doesn't bring enough to the table. The Ranger archetype wins the award for worst dedication in the game. You get exactly 1 skill proficiency and the Hunt Prey action. But remember, you don't have a Ranger subclass, meaning your Hunt Prey only gives you +2 to seeking and tracking your target. It does give you double range increment against that target, which is not useless, I'll give it that, but that is everything this dedication gives you. Similar to the fighter's archetype, Rangers do have a couple of low-level feats you might want to cheat out with this archetype. You know, Hunted Shot is really good, especially on something like a fighter or a gunslinger, but overall there's not a huge incentive to take this. Sure, you can get Animal Companion, but those scale even slower off of Ranger. If you want Animal Companion, just take Beastmaster. There's just nothing going for this archetype, forcing me to keep Ranger in D tier. Now, converse from the Ranger, the Rogue dedication is phenomenal, granting you 3 skill proficiencies, a skill feat, and trained proficiency in light armor, which remember, in Pathfinder 2e, armor does not stop you from casting spells. So if you are a wizard who is untrained in all armor and you pick up the Rogue dedication, all of a sudden you can wear leather armor for that +1 to AC. You get all of that just from the dedication at level 2 for the Rogue, but it keeps getting better. Now, obviously, the sneak attack feat is miserable. It gives you 1d4 bonus damage and maxes out at 1d6, but the rest of this archetype goes hard. First off, you can gain access to all the low-level rogue feats, like Nimble Dodge, which are still really good, but Skill Mastery is wild. Skill Mastery increases 1 trained skill to expert and 1 expert skill to master, they can't be the same skill, and you also get a skill feat for one of those 2 skills you upgraded. That's 1 feat for 2 skill bumps and a skill feat. That's wild. Plus, if you're something like a wizard who's never going to have high reflex saves, evasiveness just lets you bump it to master for a feat. And if you're a spellcaster, you don't need your feats nearly as much. Having a feat that just gives you a permanent +2 to reflex saves forever is way better than a lot of the feats you're going to be offered at some point as a spellcaster. The Rogue archetype gets an easy A tier from me, as it's useful on almost any squishy, non-armor wearing class, or anybody who just wants to sneak more skills into their build. The Witch dedication comes with only a few things. It comes with a basic familiar, so it only has 2 abilities per day, not like the Witch's normal familiar. You do get 2 cantrips, but you can only prepare 1 of them per day. No other spellcasting archetype does this. It is just the Witch who restricts you to only having 1 of your chosen cantrips available per day. These are cast with Intelligence, and it only gives you 1 skill proficiency. So on a day-to-day basis, this is only granting you a weak familiar, 1 cantrip and 1 skill proficiency compared to all the other archetypes we've seen so far. The rest of this archetype isn't that exciting, unfortunately. It gives you access to the basic witch spellcasting, and the only thing keeping this archetype out of F tier is the fact that at 4th level you can take the 2nd level witch feat, which will get you a hex. You can never get any of the hexes that witches can start with their level 1 patron, but you can at least get some of their basic lesson hexes, so you can still be like a bard who courageous anthem and hexes and moves while also having a familiar. It's not as exciting as I just made it sound. It is okay at best, so I'm giving the witch a D tier in the archetype tier list. And joining the witch at D tier is my pride and joy, the wizard. Their dedication is very similar to the witch without the restriction of 1 cantrip per day. You're getting 1 skill proficiency, 2 cantrips you can cast per day, and you do get to pick your wizard school and gain feat access to feats that require that school, which don't exist yet. I'm guessing that's going to be for future proofing. But otherwise, wizard feats are not that exciting. You get your basic wizard spellcasting from those feats, and the only exciting thing I can really get on board with is the school spells that you can get from some of the feats. Some of these school spells are really strong, but otherwise, unless there's a specific school spell you really want, the wizard archetype is not the place you should be looking for spellcasting benefits. So, we are done Player Core 1 at this point, and you might be thinking, wow, multi-class archetypes are useless. Aside from Bard and Rogue, the rest of them are pretty miserable. And you'd be right for Player Core 1, but trust me, it gets better. Let's move on to Player Core 2, starting with the Alchemist. Right off the bat, the Alchemist dedication gives you a ton. You're getting a skill proficiency, you're getting the alchemical crafting skill feat, you're getting weapon proficiency with alchemical bombs, you're getting 4 versatile files per day, which is new for the Alchemist in the Pathfinder remaster, and you get 4 of them per day with the archetype, and you get to learn 4 formulas for alchemical items, plus the extra formulas you get from alchemical crafting. Right at level 4, Advanced Alchemy is one of the best archetype feats I've ever read, in that it just gives you free consumables you can make per day of formulas you know your level or lower. And this is just going to keep getting better, even if you never take another feat in the Alchemist archetype. As your level goes up, you can learn new formulas of your new level and prepare them with Advanced Alchemy. This feat just gets better with time. The only downside is that the extra vials feat is super feat reliant if you want to get a huge bang for it. You have to take the feat multiple times. Remember, you only by default get 10 character feats from level 1 to 20, so you'd have to use multiple of those just to get a couple extra vials per day, but if they are important to you, you can. This is the first S tier archetype on this list. I believe anybody could make good use of the Alchemist archetype simply because it is free consumables that you don't need to spend money on, and you get new ones per day. The only thing that makes the core Alchemist better than this archetype is that the core Alchemist can keep scrounging for more versatile vials throughout the day and use them for anything they want, whereas you, the archetype, only get the flat 4 per day, plus a couple more depending on if you want to take the extra vials feat. Phenomenal, useful on everybody, S tier archetype. In my notes, I actually have written the Barbarian higher than I believe I'm going to place it here. The dedication is okay. You get 1 skill proficiency, you do get the anathema of your chosen instinct, but you can rage. Now, this rage is nothing special. It only gives you the flat rage bonuses, not the rage instinct bonus. But it also comes with a negative -1 to armor class, unlike the new core Barbarian who does not take that penalty. At the end of the day, this becomes a couple extra hit points, plus 2 to all your damage rolls, but -1 AC. The bonus HP from Resiliency is great for keeping you up, especially if you have that -1 AC from Raging, and you do get the level 1 Instinct power as a level 6 feat, which can grant you upwards of 8 bonus damage on all of your attacks. This would allow any character to gain the level 1 Giant Instinct Barbarian damage bonus, provided they have a weapon that fits the criteria for that instinct. The sad part is the archetype doesn't have a whole lot to offer beyond that. Don't get me wrong, a 2 feat investment to get +8 flat damage on all of your melee attacks is not terrible. You can do worse. The problem comes with that this archetype is made for other martials, like your fighters and your rangers, but the final feat gives you bonuses to Fortitude, increasing it from Expert to Master, but I believe most martial classes already get Master from their natural class progression. And you might be saying, well, take this on your Spellcaster, get your Wizard up from Expert to Master Fortitude, but then what else is this archetype actually giving you? You can't Rage, because if you're raging, you can't use Concentrate abilities, and Spellcasting is almost always a Concentrate ability. Sure, I guess you could spend another one of your limited class feats, taking the Barbarian class feat that lets you focus on an action by spending an extra action to cast it. That's just a lot of hoops to jump through for not a whole lot of benefit, especially because the rage damage isn't going to apply to ranged attacks or spell attacks. It only applies to melee attacks, so I don't really know who the Barbarian archetype is for, aside from maybe fighters looking to increase their max damage on their inevitable criticals. Overall, the Barbarian gets a C tier. I think it's useful, I think it's good, and maybe there will be new classes down the line who can make use of that bump from Expert to Master Fortitude, as well as all the damage that comes from the rage bonuses. But for now, it's just not as good as it could be. Now, the Champion archetype dedication might not look like much at first glance. It grants you 2 skill proficiencies and proficiency training in the next level up of armor you can wear. It'll either give you both light and medium if you can't wear either of those, or if you can wear both of those, it gives you heavy. That right there is useful on pretty much any class besides the monk, since the monk gaining access to light armor proficiency isn't that exciting. Now, the thing that might hold people back is that the champions have the most restrictive anathemas in the game. Not only do you have to abide by a deity's anathema, but you also have to abide by the anathema of the subclass you choose, even though you don't gain any of the benefits of that subclass. So keep all of that in mind when you take your champion archetype, but let me tell you, it's worth it. They of course have the resiliency feat if you want to give your squishy character a couple extra hit points, but they've also got the devotion spells like Lay on Hands, the evil one I can't remember, and the new Shield Spirit feat that just gives you armor class. Devotion spells are phenomenal. You can also gain the unique champion's reaction for the subclass you picked. This is wild that they would actually give the core piece of the champion's kit to any other class that wants it, granted at a higher level. This is just damage reduction for allies, and if you can get the paladin's reaction on a fighter, that's an extra reactive strike on your fighter with a new trigger. And Blessing of the Devoted is going to be incredible no matter what you pick. You're going to get either free runes on your equipment or a permanent movement speed buff from an archetype. The champion archetype has no right going as hard as it does, and it is an S tier archetype because it's useful on just anybody. Who doesn't want Lay on Hands? Who doesn't want better armor proficiency? Who doesn't want a champion's reaction to protect their adjacent ally? Your wizard can just hang in the back line, and if they get toppled by some melee characters and they hit the cleric next to the wizard can just reduce the damage the cleric takes and let the cleric step as a free action. This is such a wild archetype, and it is the second S tier on this list. Now, what if I told you we haven't even talked about the strongest one yet? And that I have reserved a special place on this tier list above S tier for one specific archetype, for one little class that nobody really talks about. The Investigator. Right off the bat, the Investigator dedication goes crazy. You get 2 skill proficiencies, and you get the Pursue a Lead and Clue In feature, basically giving you a permanent +1 to most skill checks as long as they relate to your current lead. As long as you know what the main through plot is of the campaign, and you can just pursue leads relevant to that, this is almost always going to apply, because it's just +1 to any skill check that might get you closer to your lead. Oh, you're trying to find the bandit boss? Well, you have information they might be in this warehouse. Because this is now related to your lead, you get a +1 to the skill check to pick the lock of the warehouse. It's so wild how strong that is, and how universally applicable that bonus is. But it gets stronger. I would say being allowed to put Devise a Stratagem on any class is one of the most overpowered things you can do in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As a reminder, Devise a Stratagem lets you pick a target and roll 1d20 for one action. You can then look at that d20. That d20 is what you will roll if you attack that target. You rolled a nat 20? Cool. Go ahead. Follow through with the attack with your next action. You rolled a 2? I'm going to attack something else so I can basically re-roll. And this is for skill checks too. You can say, maybe I'll demoralize him. That's a 3. I'm going to demoralize him instead. completely valid. Where this gets insane is on characters like fighters, yes, obviously, because you can fish for even more crits at your max attack bonus, but also on things like a magus. The magus is the ultimate luck-based class. You are either going to hit hard with your Great Axe plus Disintegrate Spell Strike, or you're going to miss and waste every single action that turn. But Spell Strike is only 2 actions, so what happens when you can roll to see how your Spell Strike would go, and then say, never mind, I'm attacking them instead, and just wait until you get a good stratagem roll for your Spell Strike. And you might also be thinking, well, that's bad action economy. It's 1 action to devise, and then 2 actions to Spell Strike. Well, what if I told you that if the target you're fighting is related to your currently pursued lead, it's a free action? So you as the Magus can walk up, free action, devise a stratagem, and then say, never mind, Scorching Ray that guy. It's wild. It takes so much of the luck and resource gambling away from classes like the Magus or the Gunslinger for that matter, and can almost guarantee you useful applications of your limited resources like Spell Strike or ammunition on a Gunslinger. It's insane. Add on top of that the Investigator archetype also gives skill mastery just like the Rogue archetype did for those huge skill bumps and a free skill feat, and Master Spotter. If you're a class who gets stuck at Expert Perception, you can just gain Master Perception. That's useful for locating traps, hidden enemies, rolling initiative half the time. You can look at that as +2 to initiative forever. This is one of the most broken things I've ever read in Pathfinder 2e, and that is why the Investigator archetype is
It's no use!
Plus tier, the single strongest multi-class archetype in the entire game for almost any class. The Monk! Starting off, the dedication has some really funny, useless text saying, you become trained in unarmed strikes. Every class is trained in unarmed strikes. You do get to remove the non-lethal trait from your unarmed strikes and make them deal 1d6 damage on top of a skill proficiency, but that's it. You're looking at an average of maybe 1 extra damage on your unarmed strikes and 1 skill proficiency. That's about it. So if you were already an ancestry that came with like a Jaws or a Tail attack, this technically doesn't even help you because those are going to be better than your fist attack, and you're just getting 1 skill proficiency, that's all. They've got resiliency, which is fine, and you can gain some low-level stance feats, which can upgrade your unarmed attacks. You know, if you already don't have something strong from an ancestry unarmed strike, you can gain access to all those low-level monk stances, which are, to be fair, very powerful. Now, if you're taking this on any character who doesn't wear armor, maybe you're a huge dexterity cap rogue, or maybe you're just like a wizard who's not going to be wearing armor anyway, monk moves is the gold in this there hill. It is just a plus 10 foot speed bonus forever. As long as you are not wearing armor, you got the zoomies, you are flying. This is just a good defensive feat to have on any spellcaster that doesn't wear armor, because that's going to bump you. If you've just got the flat 25 foot move speed, suddenly you're 35. That's wild. Having limited flurry of blows is fine, but I don't know why they would do that and make it a level 10 feat. Flurry of Blows in itself already isn't that powerful. It's great, don't get me wrong, it's 2 attacks for 1 action, but they do still apply multiple attack penalty, so the fact that you can only use this once every 1d4 rounds is a really weird limitation when you're already forcing them to wait until character level 10 to take it. It really felt like the monk didn't have enough to give to an archetype, so they felt like they needed to lock the one unique feature, Flurry of Blows, behind as many walls as possible. And of course, Perfection's Path is great on any character because it's going to upgrade probably your weakest saving throw to Master. It does not matter what your base class is, you're gonna have a saving throw stuck at Expert. So overall, Monk does get B tier because of all the utility that is just universally applicable to any class in the game. You just don't get much Monk out of it. So power-wise, and according to my own aspects for how I rank these things, I have to give it a B tier. But for flavor, I'd probably give it closer to C tier. The Oracle, nice simple dedication giving you 2 cantrips, 2 skill proficiencies, and charisma as a casting modifier, already off to a fantastic start, just like the Bard that we started this list with. Not only does this archetype give you access to revelation spells, which are really, really good focus spells, seriously, Oracles have some of the most reliable, consistent focus spells in the game, but it also gives you access to the low-level Oracle revelation feats, which are incredible. In fact, that's why I give the Oracle archetype an F tier. No, not because it's weak. In fact, if I was giving this a fair judgment, I would give this an A tier. No, or the Oracle archetype gets an F tier, because any class who takes the Oracle archetype is a better Oracle than the Oracle. Their low-level revelation feats are sort of their new identity. That's how they access their curse, and those feats are super powerful because of it. Sure, anyone who takes this archetype can only use 2 curse-bound effects per fight before they have to meditate and bring it back down, but that's fine. You wouldn't want to go past curse-bound 2 anyway, since that's when the curses get incredibly detrimental, and fighters should not have access to Whispers of Weakness. There's almost nothing that saves the Oracle's base class here. Pretty much anyone who takes the archetype will get almost the entire benefit of being an Oracle without needing to risk the super high detriments of being an Oracle. Sure, you'll still suffer the first and second levels of your curse, but here, check this out. If you're a fighter who takes the Oracle archetype, then just take this curse. It just gives you a little bit of lightning damage weakness, and then, oh no, minus to your ranged attack rolls. I don't think you're gonna care when you use Whispers of Weakness and then use your Great Axe to cut the boss in half with a +2 to hit. This archetype is incredibly strong, and I highly recommend it for almost anybody. Anyone will find a way to use this. I just hate that it makes anybody just better than the Oracle at using their own tools, and that is not how an archetype should work. The Sorcerer. 2 cantrips, 2 skill proficiencies, charisma as a spellcasting modifier. Basically the exact same dedication as the Oracle. You do pick a bloodline, and you can later gain access to that bloodline's spells thanks to certain feats. And a lot of these basic bloodline spells are super powerful, especially like Imperial. If you are any other type of spellcaster, you would do yourself a disservice to not pick up the Imperial Focus spell. And then the advanced spells at level 12 can be really cool too. Overall, the Sorcerer archetype just gives you more spellcasting options, and I think it's the best and most eloquently written of all the spellcaster archetypes. You can get the bonus spell slots from Sorcerers itself, and then you can gain all the cool little bloodline spells which often interact with different things in the game. It gives you a lot of options, and that is what an archetype should do. So especially for just being a spellcaster archetype, which are sort of notoriously worse in this game, I do give Sorcerer a B tier, maybe even an A tier if I did more research into the possible builds. And to culminate the list, we have the Swashbuckler, which is going to give you 2 skill proficiencies and full panache benefits. You can apply the bravado trait to tumble through, as well as any of the subclass skills, depending on your chosen style, and you can gain panache from those actions. Now, keep in mind, the new stylish combatant is separate from panache itself. You will only be gaining the base panache benefits of bonus damage on your melee strikes. You will not be gaining the +1 to all skill checks. Keep in mind, though, this does not come with a finisher in the dedication. No, you need to take the level 4 feat to get a super nerfed, very weak finisher that you can use your panache to activate. Overall, not that exciting, but just cool if you want a finisher on a character who's not a swashbuckler. Where this archetype really revs up is with Swashbuckler's Riposte. This is one of the most useful actions in the game, and you can get it on any character. If a creature critically misses an attack against you, you get a reactive strike. You put that on your fighter with a Great Axe and you're off to the races, because inevitably you're at least going to fight some mindless animals or mindless undead that are just going to have nothing better to do than attack 3 times on their turn, where they will inevitably, on their -10 attack, probably critically miss you, thus giving you a free attack that round. In my opinion, Swashbuckler's Riposte is more reliable than the fighter's reactive strike. And then just like the monk, Swashbuckler's speed is great. +5 feet forever, and then plus another 5 feet if you have panache. Just putting speed on characters equals good. And then they also get evasiveness, so if you are a character who maxes out at expert reflex, you can bump that up to master. Really, really useful for some classes. I give the Swashbuckler archetype a solid B tier, just universally useful, never anything game-breaking like an Investigator, but very good nonetheless. And there you have it, every single multi-class archetype from Player Cores 1 and 2. There are some big hitters and some real stinkers, but I want to know if you think I over or underrated any of these archetypes. Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from all y'all with your opinions on how I framed things and talked about them, and especially when I miss things. I'm sure there are some low-level class feats I did not take into consideration for some of these archetypes that put on the right character could be totally bananas, so let me know any of those that you know of, because I love to learn more from y'all in the comments section below. Thank you again to all my patrons and everybody who has supported me throughout the years. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to go take a shower because it's super hot in here and I'm dying. And until next time, No nat ones. Oh, I'm moist.